Hello, welcome to another tonalist landscape oil painting demonstration. This is your painter in residence, M. Francis McCarthy, and the painting I'm bringing you today is from our solo pigment series. It is Alizarin Crimson. Alizarin Crimson. As it goes in the Donovan song. Probably most of you are too young to know that reference, but that's alright. Alizarin Crimson is a great color, and this is really one of the best paintings in the series, so I really hope you enjoy it. It came out way better than I thought it was going to, and it was probably the most successful, given the formula. It was maybe not the most successful, but it's up there. It's up there with the best. I think you will agree. Also, some of you might be thrilled to see me include a little house. No problem. I do it for you. I do it all for you. Let's my personal history with Alizarin Crimson goes back to when I first started painting. One of the limited palettes that I started with had Alizarin Crimson, cadmium yellow, ultramarine blue, and white, and Viridian green, or maybe it was some Winsor Newton green. Either way, it doesn't matter. Crimson was there from the beginning. Crimson is a great color. You can get some pretty nice purples, as you'll see in this painting. You can get really nice browns when you bring in some yellow with a little black. In fact, you can get a dead ringer for burnt sienna if you need it. Much easier just to use burnt sienna, but that's, I'd already talked about that in the burnt sienna video, which I think is our last video. So on my palette, Alizarin Crimson sits right next to burnt sienna. Now, since I've had burnt sienna and the other earth pigments, if I was going to work an extremely limited palette, I would go with Alizarin Crimson because it is very flexible. It's very transparent. It has good, strong tinting strength, although nothing compared to the Phthalos. Those have got to be your strongest tinted colors, period. And maybe that Indian yellow, which is Darylite yellow in reality. Not actual Indian yellow, but I digress, as always. Anyway, I've been using it for years. It's on my palette. It does. It's great to actually. A lot of times, I might be working with some greens and burnt siennas. If I want to push something into real red territory, a lot of times I'll scoop up some crimson. I also love to use crimson in the shadows. And when I was painting, before I was painting with ivory black, I was making a very dark black type color. Using Alizarin Crimson and Phthalo Green. That makes a really nice chromatic black. So you ought to try that if you're not into ivory black like I am. The colors used in this painting, as I would have stated in the little blurb underneath this video, is Alizarin Crimson Permanent, and we'll talk about that in a minute, Mars Black, and Titanium White. The Mars Black was especially crucial in this one because the alizarin is so transparent, so I needed to have something to help me bring in that opacity. And you can see this kind of purpley tone I'm doing right now, the various range of purples. That's the crimson, the black, and the white. What a beautiful range of colors we get, and into some really soothing and wonderful pinks as well. You can see we're getting some nice lavender tones. It's very flexible, and I definitely made a mental note about these colors and this approach. I think it's that's been the greatest thing about this series is pigments that I've had on my palette for 10 years. I'm doing things with them that I had not done before, which is always valuable, isn't it? So it's in the darks. It's good for pushing. It's good for pushing things a little more red if you need, without like that CAD thing. The CAD thing, when you're going more red with the CAD thing, you get in the opacity too, which is also very useful. A lot of times I might do the alizarin with my greens in the shadow type areas, right? Because that transparency, and shadows are transparent. You want to keep that in mind. In your painting, it's almost always good to have the shadows transparent. And then the other elements, your greens, your browns, and things, you could have more opacity. As things move lighter up in the spectrum too, the point where you have your titaniums mixed with yellows for the lightest parts of your painting, maybe the sky. And oftentimes they're painted more thickly and usually more opaquely. Yeah. I've got a few really interesting articles. This is, and I want to give you some history on this color. I'm using the Gamblin version. Now, Gamblin sells Alizarin Crimson and what they call Alizarin Permanent. I don't know why. I don't really see a huge difference in color. I've always used the Permanent because if I'm going to do a painting, I'm working for, for art history here. So everything I do, I want to be as permanent as possible. So I've always just used the Alizarin Permanent, but we're going to get into some of that. We have an article from good old Winsor Newton. Spotlight on Alizarin Crimson. By the way, if you see me misspell this, I'm an artist, not a speller, just so you know, so don't bother correcting me. I got it. It's an I at the end now, not an E or an A. Alizarin Crimson is a deep red pigment with a blue undertone, known for its capacity to create a wide range of rich, permanent purples and browns. It is a color with an eventful history. It began as a dye thousands of years ago, made from a herbaceous madder plant native to Asia and southern Europe. The dye was prominently used for coloring clothes, and traces were found in ancient Egypt, Persia, and the ruins of Pompeii. By the 7th century BC, the dye had been made into a lake pigment and was used across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. By this time, the use of madder dye and pigment was widespread, but they remained costly and time-consuming to produce. There's another article, I don't know if I'll get to it or not, was talking about the cost of bringing in these roots. It's a purple root that the original dye came from. When there was problems, it was really expensive and not all that light fast. In the early 19th century, the renowned English colorman George Field conducted extensive research into the madder plant and created a more efficient process to create the lake pigment. This was known as madder lake in the old days. I don't know where the word alizarin came from. I haven't tracked that down yet, and to be honest, I haven't really worked that hard either at it. But maybe you could. Let me know in the comments below. His findings were instrumental in the development of some of the early Winsor Newton colors, allowing artists greater access to permanent materials. In 1826, two French chemists, two French guys, I'm not going to read the names and butcher them, made further developments and isolated two separate dyes in madder, alizarin and, we're finding out about the alizarin, and purpurin. Then German chemists, two German names, distilled alizarin with zinc, leading them to discover, anthraquinone in 1869. They were then able to synthesize the pigment from coal tar, making alizarin crimson the first natural dye to be synthesized. Synthetic alizarin crimson cost a fraction of the price to make, and its consistency and light fastness quickly made it a favorite red pigment. It's not an expensive pigment. It's one of the cheaper ones on my palette. Very, very transparent. And I think a lot of the transparent pigments do have a dye basis. And in the case where it's a dye basis, they would, like with this madder plant, they would get the juice and dry it out, make a powder, then you have a powder, and then you would introduce that to oil, right? Customarily, pigments called alizarin crimson are made of the original lake pigment, making them closer to the original madder dye. And those labeled permanent alizarin crimson are made from the highly stable and permanent synthetic alternatives. Both are valuable and offer artists a wide range of dark pigments, which tells me they carry both as well. To be honest, if it isn't a light fastness rating that's the best, I don't care. I don't use it, And I have heard things about these light fastness, like it might be quite light fast when used in a glaze, but not so much so when used in a body sort of way as a thicker pigment. That's one thing I heard. Anyway, tipping on along. Madder Lake. We're going to get into a little more Madder Lake. History of Madder Lake. In parentheses, alizarin. Madder Lake was an important synthetic pigment produced in the early years of the 19th century. This time, cost was not a factor in its development, but the need for a more permanent version of its ancient precursor. The madder lakes, which were prepared from in a variety of shades, blah, 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 blah. I'm wasting your time because this article's all over the map. Let's skip that. The enduring appeal of Alizarin Crimson. This is from jacksonart.com. The history of Alizarin Crimson begins with the madder plant. The natural red dye was made from the root of the madder plant, first used to dye fabrics over 3,000 years ago. Oh my god. That's one thing I love about painting, man. All the history, you know, you really feel connected to the traditions of those that have come before. It was one of the first dyes to be made into a lake pigment. Lake pigments are created by fixing a soluble dye to a mordant, an inert, colorless substance, usually a metallic salt. The result is an insoluble pigment suitable for grinding into a binder to make paint. Oh, so that explains what the lake pigments are. We just found that out. So they're binding it, in this case, to zinc. Madder lake, also known as rose madder, is a fugitive pigment that was used extensively during the Renaissance. As the popularity of oil painting spread, its transparency made it ideal for glazing techniques. In the 19th century, madder became the first natural dye to be produced synthetically. The synthetic dye, called Alizarin Crimson, was much cheaper to produce than rose madder. For artists, it was a better alternative to rose madder because of its improved lightfastness. And I actually have a picture of the two. I can see a subtle difference. Why not? One's called NR9 and the other's PR83. And the one we're painting with today, that's good old PR83. Because of its blue hue, it's easily persuaded to make dark maroons and purples with ultramarine blue, and it does make a bunch of lovely colors. That's why it's very useful in a limited palette. Mixing with yellows creates fiery oranges. Combining with genuine cadmium yellow would make the mixture very opaque, but as this cadmium medium hue is more transparent than the genuine cadmium pigment, some of the whatever. As green and red are complementary colors, Viridian and Alizarin Crimson desaturate each other and make a neutral tint which looks black in mass tone. Mixing chromatic blacks rather than using black paint straight for the two gives much more realistic dark tones. That's what you say. Maybe it is more realistic. I actually don't care much about realism, to be honest. I'm painting scenes that you can definitely discern as being realistic. Like, that's a house, those are trees, that's a sky, that's a little stream, etc. But I'm not that interested in painting, you know, photographic looking stuff. On his site, Handprint, Bruce McEvoy says that it fades so reliably in watercolor that he uses it as a control color for his lightfastness tests. He concludes that PR83 is unsuitable for professional watercolor artworks. Okay, so PR83 is the original Alizarin Crimson. Light-fast alternatives to Alizarin Crimson are for artists that have concerned about lightfastness, which should be you. There are light-fast substitutes available. Below is a comparison of examples for genuine Alizarin Crimson paints. The pigments used are it's one of these quinanaquidone is what it's called, and as we I think discovered in the previous article, that is still very much related to actually I don't know if it's related to the madder plant. They're getting out of coal, right? Anyway, beautiful color. Isn't this a nice painting? Anyway, it's Thanksgiving in the US today. It's not here in New Zealand. It's a regular day here, but hope you're having a great day with your family, and everyone's doing well there in the United States, Europe, the rest of the world, and every place that this transmission is being received. We have to go in this series, Phthalo Green coming up next, and it's on my palette next to Alizarin Crimson because I was always mixing them together to get that black, so it's just a habit I have. After that, Permanent Green Light, very interesting. And then we have two blues. We have Cobalt and Phthalo Blue, and that will be wrapping up the series. So, yeah, we're kind of getting close to the end. I was considering bringing in some other paintings I've done, but I think we'll just see it through. It's only going to be... I'll be doing another one of these over the weekend. This one's a little late for this week. It's been a very scattered week, with students and other stuff. Anyway, this will be going up tonight. I'll make a point. And until I come back with another video, please do me a favor. Take good care of yourself, your family, your loved ones, all your friends, please be patient with other people that do not share your points of view on things, especially now. It's pretty troubled time. And while you're doing all that, stay out of trouble. Take good care and stay out of trouble.